Elder Murry. Thank you, Elder Murry, for that welcome opening and your important words. Your guidance to us for this event is truly appreciated and valued. To all attendees, on behalf of the department's Indigenous Reconciliation Committee, thank you for joining us in this shared Zoom colloquium for the SFU Psychology IRC Indigenous Scholars public talk. The colloquium and small group conversation meeting for Indigenous students with the scholar, which follows this event, are an important part of the work of the department IRC and a way for students, faculty, and staff, as well as the broader community, to learn from Indigenous scholars and knowledge holders and to build connections. We are grateful to the Department Colloquium Committee, as well as to the Social Psychology area for their support as co-sponsors and co-funding today's event with the invited speaker, Dr. Murry, and with opening by Elder Murry. We had about 200 people registered for this event by about an hour ago. And so typically with these public events, about 50% of people show up and attend because they're free. We're enthusiastic and thankful for to the registrants as well as to the attendees. With so many people here with this Zoom non-webinar chosen format, to minimize distractions, you're invited to pin the speaker if they're not pinned already, and select speaker view rather than gallery view. We ask also that you your microphones be kept off, and you might also wish to turn off your videos if you like. When we reach the time for question and answer, we will then ask you to type questions into the chat. We are grateful to everyone for joining us today from different time zones, territories, communities, and nations. I'm coming from atop what is known as Burnaby Mountain, where the main campus of SFU is located. I live and work here, and it is from here that I give the short introduction to Adam Murry for today's colloquium. In the registration information for this event, you were able to read about some of Dr. Murry's many accomplishments. Dr. Murry is Apache, faculty member at the University of Calgary, where he runs the Indigenous Organizations and Communities Development Research Lab. He received his PhD at Portland State University in their applied psychology program. Not many departments have such programs, and this program is particularly notable. With his training, he has developed extensive work and research experience in industrial and organizational psychology. He is co-PI on some important projects and has conducted research in applied settings with regards to Indigenous employment, issues around mentorship, allyship, and education, as well as others' work. In his work prior to joining the University of Calgary, he worked with the Department of Health and Human Services, San Carlos Apache Tribe, as well as with the Confederated Tribes of Colville, from which some of the registrants are joining us. He continues to consult with the tribal and nonprofit sector and serves on several diversity and Indigenous specific committees at the university. We are deeply thankful to him, and I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to be introduced to his work and to Dr. Murry a few years ago. The members of the Department IRC and co-sponsors are assured that you will also feel the same, to be thankful to be introduced to his work. Dr. Murry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Tay. Thank you, Rochelle, Michael, for your territorial acknowledgements, and Cerise for helping to organize this stuff. Thanks also to the IRC and SFU for making an excuse for all of us to get together. And thanks to everyone who's logging in and calling in, willing to spend the next hour, 90 minutes or so hanging with me. And I want to say especially thanks to Elder Murry Hooper. Whenever these things are recorded, you always get a little bit nervous because when you're hanging out in person, you throw out 10 jokes and half of them ain't funny. It's okay because people will just remember the funny ones, but when it's recorded, everybody remembers both of them, man. So your opening prayer, it really helps to ground me, helps me to remember these bigger things that we're a part of, and that this really isn't a me thing. This is like an us thing. And even for, the folks that are here with maybe research related questions, or folks that are chasing kids and pets while they're doing accidents in the background, doing laundry, half listening, whatever, like I'm all of those things too. So anyways, I appreciate y'all being here. I'm gonna steal the mic and for the next little bit and talk about some stuff. So let me share my screen here. All right. So I'm going to talk about research today. I'll talk about a bunch of things. I'm hoping that by throwing out a wide net, that regardless of kind of where you're at in relationship to research, that you'll be able to pull something helpful out of it. Like I said, I've been doing research for about 20 years, and it was working with an on-reserve community that got me to do it, that made me think, oh, this is going to be something I should do. This is a way I could contribute, But this was back in 2003. Linda Smith's Decolonizing Methodologies had just come out in 1999 in New Zealand. It hadn't really made its way over. I had Sean Wilson's book, Research of Ceremony, comes out in 08. Story Work comes out in 08. Joanne Archibald. Margaret Kovac's book comes out, Indigenous Methodologies, 2009. Right, and so these books, I got really heavily entrenched in research methods, in Western methods, and I'm a mixed methodologist. I do a lot of quantitative stuff, and I do qualitative too. I was lucky to get trained in both. But this is going to be something that's going to come up over and over again as I talk, because people approach this topic in a lot of different ways, and I think that as a methodologist, thinking about Indigenous research, thinking about Indigenous methodologies, I don't know. I think maybe I have a thing or two, so that might help clarify it. I don't know. If it helps, it helps. If not, then it's okay. Thanks for hanging out, anyways. I'm here talking on Treaty 7 territory. I moved up here from the U.S. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I'm here on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. To our east, we got our brothers and sisters at Siksika Nation. To the south, it's Kaana and Piikani First Nations, both all in the Blackfoot Confederacy. Right at the south end of town here, we got Tsuut'ina Nation, and to our west, we got the Stoney Nakoda, including Wesley, Chiniki, Bearspaw, and I think Wesley is Good Stoney First Nation now. They changed it. Anyways, so this is my family. This is at our Pasadena powwow. I grew up in Los Angeles, and our totally urban space, urban environment, urban Indian, and but because of my a couple of family members, my dad and my aunt, we they both were involved with both cultural revitalization stuff, advocacy stuff. My aunt has worked in for organizations for Native families with children with disabilities for over 30 years. And my old man, in addition to doing a bunch of stuff in ministry, we put on 2 powwows every year. One was in Santa Fe Springs. I think that one ran for about 19 years. And then this one, the Pasadena powwow, ran for about 23 years. And we'd still be doing it if he wouldn't have left us last year. But that's just part of my family. My mom, she's Ukrainian. Her family came out to the US back in 1901 and then moved west. And then my dad's dad was Irish, marries a Native woman. They move out from Oklahoma out to the west also. But I got these different constituencies in my life. You know, I got love for everybody, and I've been really fortunate to kind of exist in a multicultural space, multi-class space, multi-ethnic space. And so when I think about things, I have to think about it from a lot of different perspectives, right? I have to be true to who I am and to the people that my words affect. And so I have to think about, you know, not just my nuclear family, but also my adopted family, and even my powwow family. A lot of those folks watched me grow up as a kid, and you know, I'm accountable to all these different voices in my life. And I think that this is also something that's going to come up, and that you'll be able to kind of see in the way that I formulate my ideas, because I really am trying to think and talk to multiple audiences, and so you know, hopefully I can be respectful in that way. So this is just a little drawing I threw together. This is my mom's family coming out and ending up in Oregon, and then my dad's dad came from Ireland, and then in Oklahoma meets when I was a kid, I called her my brown grandma, my white grandma, and so everybody ends up in Oregon. This is where I was born. There was no work. My old man was a roofer, and there was no work, so we ended up moving back down to Los Angeles. And then I grew up there. I lived there for about 28 years before going to Portland State for graduate school, and then I moved down to Arizona for a couple of years, and then I came out here in 2017. So I've been here for about six years, and I got to say, I've been learning so much. It's been such a gift. The types of spaces, just even for your imagination, things that you're working for, fighting for, the opportunity. All I can say, it's been a real gift being here in Canada, getting to learn from y'all. Did my slides just disappear?
Yes, they did.
Okay. I don't know what happened there.
But thank you so much for contextualizing your journey. Very important.
Well, so it's important for a couple of different reasons, and one of them is this research thing, because I didn't ever mean to get into research. It wasn't even my plan to get educated. I went to my mom was a preschool teacher, and my dad was a roofing contractor. And so my plan was to work as a roofer. Like, I had grown up with that whole idea I was supposed to take over that business. I did have one educational opportunity that was unique, in that when my mom, when we moved down to LA, she didn't have any education. And so they let her teach preschool at this private school as long as she did continuing education credits. And so I got to go there as a kid, even though we would never have been able to afford it. So I got like this private school education up until 6th grade, which was, I think, influential in terms of my ability to kind of fit into school. Because when I went to public school, even though I was not a very good student in private, I was ahead of everybody in public school when I made that transition. And I think it was just because of the pace of education there. But otherwise, up here in this corner, you can see this all, it looks like a prison. This was the apartment I lived in, because I grew up in Selmar. It's like a little kind of Mexican barrio in Los Angeles. Those spikes, they used to have red paint on them to help let you like be aware that they were sharp, but it looked like blood dripping down. It was kind of a scary place. But we were, a lot of crime, a lot of problems, and we got some pictures of some schools I got kicked out of here. And I'm just bringing this up because it wasn't school kind of took me by surprise, and so I think that the way that I think about why we do what we do, it's just calibrated with a different set of expectations than I think that some people have who are like groomed to succeed in these environments. Like I had to scrutinize the process differently because of the voices that I had, speaking to me. I did work roofing for about 14 years on and off. There's my old man. We had just roofed that house. It looks real good. But the bills come a little more regular than the work does. They call it a feast and famine cycle in the construction industry. And so I got a job at UPS. There's a couple of my buddies. I worked at UPS for 10 years. And that was what I thought I was going to be doing for work. It was got benefits, pension, health, paid prescriptions, stock options. Oh, it's good company. I love it. But somehow I get into school, right? So what ends up happening is that same era where I was getting kicked out of schools and getting in trouble for things, it ended up really taxing my spirit, and I ended up actually getting involved with this little church in my neighborhood, and it really helped me out in terms of just kind of cutting myself off from a bunch of things I didn't know how to get out of. And but I wasn't 100% sure about the ideas, see? And so I started asking people questions, everybody I could ask questions to. And people kept saying, oh, you got to go to college, you got to go to college. I go, dude, stop trying to sell me that propaganda. I'm not going to go. And eventually, I don't know, I guess I just heard it too many times or something. And I was like, all right, maybe I'll go. And so I started going to a seminary, actually. It was a Bible college. But they don't really want you to go there to ask questions. They want you to go there and learn the stuff. And I got pulled aside a couple of times, and like I had to like affirm my adherence to the doctrines and stuff. I was like, this is getting weird. So I left, and I went to community college, and I was a philosophy major, and that was cool because you could ask anything. You could even say, how do I know I'm sitting in this room talking to you right now? And people would be like, oh, that's a great conversation. And so it was a nice space to be in, start talking with everybody. That community college is right down the road from my house. And so it was just like a good home feel. And I was trying really hard while I was there, because I was on this quest, right? Quest for information. And when you show up to a place and you try real hard and you stay after and ask questions and I don't know, the questions that you ask are good ones, or trying to be anyway, people encourage you. They say, hey, you should stick around, you should keep doing this, you're pretty good. And so I just kind of kept going to school the whole time I was working at UPS and working roofing. There was times where I would work at UPS all night, and then come home and wash my arms and change my clothes and go work roofing during the day, and then come home and wash my arms and change my clothes, and then go to school from 7 to 10 at night. And I don't really know how I did it. I couldn't do it now, but it was just something where I just kind of kept going. People kept telling me to keep going. So it wasn't even, once I had kind of got the information that I was looking for, I was going to leave, but I was encouraged to stay. And I ended up matriculating to a 4-year university, Cal State Northridge. I thought, well, I got a couple, year or so to, couple of years to finish the degree, might as well finish it up, have that thing, doesn't hurt. And at the time we were low income, so I qualified for like financial assistance and stuff through the university, and it just made it accessible. And I was gonna graduate and bounce, and I ended up meeting a few folks that told me, hey, look, you got to apply for this program. It's a research program. It's really good if you want to go to graduate school. And I was like, well, I don't really know. I was going to grad school. And I said, okay, well, I'll apply for it, and ended up getting in. And I think this was just like, the creator orchestrating things sometimes. Before, like right after I had heard that I got accepted, but before I'd started doing any work or taking any classes, my dad was talking with one of our family friends on the reserve in the Southwest. And he put me on the phone with him, and he said, hey, come over here and talk with Dave. And I said, all right. And so I start chatting him up, and I tell him, I go, hey man, how are things going on the res? I go, I'm feeling pretty disconnected over here, in the city. Everything is just, there's the city, 7 million people in LA. It's the second largest number of indigenous people in the US, next to New York. But you don't see nobody except for during powwow season. And powwows, it's city powwows, it's just different, and he goes, things are not going good here for our young men. And I go, oh, what's going on? And he goes, well, we're getting hit real hard with this. At the time, it was a new phenomenon, methamphetamine. Amphetamines had been around since World War II, but methamphetamine was invented in the 90s, and the chemical that you needed to make it was not as regulated in Mexico. And so the southern states were getting hit real hard, and the reserves were being used like lily pads because people knew that they had, really large land bases with low police presence, and they were protected from federal jurisdiction and stuff like that. So he tells me, he goes, well, we're trying to apply for grants for public education, for prevention, and for intervention, but the government doesn't believe we have a problem because we have no data. And I said, that's ridiculous. And I go, well, hey, check it out. I go, I don't know if this would be useful or not. I said, but I just got into this program like a week ago, like 2 weeks ago. I got accepted into this thing. I'm going to have like some funds and some time to do some research. Would it be useful if I did that thing like with y'all, and then you can like keep the data, use it for all your stuff? He goes, yeah, let me introduce you to some people. And so this is how I got like involved doing research. And so I drove back and forth from state to state all the time. And I still, it was 20 years ago. I still work with those folks. And now it's like on the ripple effects of those problems. And because of that program, I also got into some other undergraduate research fellowships, one at University of California, Irvine, one at UCLA, and then there was another one for the state. But I got just action-packed with all these methods. And, Western methods were really the only thing that was available, and quantitative methods were the most highly regarded. And so I thought, okay, I'll learn how to do this stuff. And people kept telling me like, oh man, I'm so glad that you don't mind looking at numbers all day because I hate it. And I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah, I don't mind it. Like, yeah, you should do that. You should do that. So people were pushing me to continue in that way. I had done so much schooling that I was just sick of it. And I was dying inside. And so I took off some time before I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to graduate school or not. And over about 3 years, started getting hungry again, started just working for some knuckleheads bosses. I was like, I don't know if I can do this the rest of my life, and just having to really think like, well, what would I want to do? When was I happiest? And I thought, when I was on reserve, doing, work that I thought like I believed in, and I felt like I was, I don't know, not just showing up with my hand out, but I was showing up like trying to offer something. I thought I could see myself trying to do that. So I was kind of perplexed that it was really easy to get funding for diabetes research or alcohol research or tobacco use research and these other kind of I would say downstream symptoms of colonialism, but you couldn't talk really about employment. This one particular reserve had 75% unemployment. I was like, how are you going to have drug prevention programs and not be talking about jobs and stuff? This is, you can turn $100 a product for $1,000. what incentive is there not to get? So I wanted to get involved with the employment stuff, and so I went to graduate school, and this is how I ended up in industrial organizational psychology. I was looking for anything that was about Indigenous economic development, and I had a psych bachelor's, so anything that was in that realm, and there really wasn't any except for this one dude. His name's Keith James. He's half black, half Onondaga, and he had like 5 streams of research, and one of them was on Indigenous community, like sustainable development, like that type of thing. And so that had an economic development component to it. So I went to go work with him, and I did, and it was great. And it I proliferated. Like I started like getting all these types of collaborations and opportunities to contribute to a bunch of different stuff. That continued when I moved to Arizona. I did my postdoc at University of Arizona. I worked with the Tohono Nation out there, San Carlos, and then I moved up here. I got hired as part of the Indigenous strategy. So the University of Calgary, they launched the Indigenous strategy at Topatope in 2017, same year I got hired. And I guess they were working on it already for a couple of years. But this is the commitment that the university has with the local First Nations, heavily influenced by the relationship with the Blackfoot Confederacy. But you can check it out online. It's a powerful initiative. It basically has this giant agreement that then the university was beholden to, and I think there's 7 different committees that are responsible for integrating the terms of the agreement and all these different spectrums, everything from policies to architecture to student experiences, faculty experiences, cultural integrate, all kinds of stuff. So really cool. And so this is a list of projects that I've kind of done or got going, and you'll see that they're all different, like they're all in different areas, and this is because of this methodologist training that I got. When you're an expert at something, then you're kind of expected to publish in that one thing, and this is actually a criticism of my record, depending on what side of the fence you're on. But methods are nice because they're laterally mobile. Nobody owns the process of crunching numbers or distilling meaning from words. And so this was something that I thought, like, I want to be of service. I want to learn how to do methods. And so if I walk into a community and they want to know something that's best answered by qualitative data, I better have some qualitative methods in my toolbox. And if I go in and they got a bunch of, I don't know, health data or education data, they need somebody to crunch those numbers, then I got to be able to do that. I can't just say, oh, I really want to help, but sorry, it has to come in the form of a correlation. Like I had to do something, I don't know. And so you'll all of these different areas represent different collaborations, different folks that have basically hit me up for one reason or the other, and said, is there, can you do something with us or for us or something like that? So now it's 2023. It's been a long time. I had a lot of time thinking about methods and stuff. And so I'm going to talk about some things that I've learned along the way, some bridges or I've crossed, and just some of the ways of thinking about it that I use that have kind of helped me negotiate these spaces, because it is there's lots of slippery slopes. There's lots of potential for becoming a part of the machine. There's ways of conducting unethical research and then still believing that you're ethical. I would say that the real threat is doing useless research, and then thinking that it's that it's useful just because it's published or something like that. But we'll talk more about that in a little later. But I want to make a distinction, because when we say this word research, it's almost like a projective test. People kind of think whatever they think research is. I remember one time I was working at UPS on the line, and I asked this dude, I go, so, hey man, what do you know? And he goes, according to me and my research, and I leaned in, and he goes, all of this is controlled by the government and aliens. And I was like, whoa. And I was like, this is a different type of research than I was thinking you were going to say, bro. So there's research. I want to kind of clarify that we're talking about kind of like this systematic research that takes place in universities and organizations and governments and commissions and all that kind of stuff. But even when we use that word research, it means kind of different things, because there's research with the small r, which is kind of like the research that you or I might do. But then there's research like as an institution. And it's important that we understand how research fits into how these two things kind of work in tandem with each other, because it is a part of a system. So if here's a little breakdown, I don't got to go through all of this, but research has kind of flown from a particular intellectual legacy that's come from a particular place in the world and influenced by particular thinkers. And it's this inherited legacy of research that we got. If you think about two of the biggest paradigms within Western scholarly literature right now, one of them is like the positivism or post-positivism, where essentially reality is unknowable to us because our intuitions, our consensus, our traditions, even our senses don't pick up on all of reality. And so we have to rely on measurement. This is like Descartes' thinking. All right, we have to rely on measurement to give us access to reality, which is out there, and that's real. But whatever we think, it's just subjective opinions and full of error and bias and subjectivity and that kind of thing. And then really following the civil rights movement, when scientists were forced to comprehend the world in a way that other people who lived through the same historical event that you did might not have the same opinion that you do. And so social constructivism really came to save the day at the time in the 1970s. This paradigm spreads all over, and it changes. It says, well, qualitative research in particular, this is how it was articulated. Qualitative research is valuable because understanding what people think is real is just as important for predicting their behavior as what's really real. And so we need to understand what we think and the way that we construct the world. And it's a reciprocal thing, because the way that we believe, we then actualize it through our behaviors. Now, these two paradigms exist within this larger financial structure. Okay, so you got, the vast majority of research that takes place is either government-funded research or private R&D, research and development. And so the private R&D stuff, they keep it, very little of it gets published. So we're really talking about government-funded research, or either for philanthropic, those are the big means. So you get these national organizations, and they're trying to respond, the government's trying to respond to what the population is demanding. And so they offer incentives to do different types of research. People like me write grants trying to compete to get the funding. And I say, listen, I'll study that. I'll study it this way. I studied it anyways before, so I'm a good person to give the money to. And then if I get it, it comes to my university and then my team, and we spend it, and we have timelines and deadlines, and we have to have products to show that we've done the stuff with the money. We write reports and journals and conferences and books and all kinds of things, and that's supposed to share the information that with our intellectual freedom allowed us to collect, and then it's supposed to inform all like policies. And in an ideal sense, this is like a feedback mechanism for like what the society is going through, and then using investigative processes that produce highly credible information to make decisions with. This is the ideal loop. But it's important to understand here that not everybody's perspectives are being represented in what gets paid, right? This is a entrenched system. It's serving needs that it has, okay? And research is not the only lever of change. I wish I was independently wealthy so that I could just say, I just want to set up this program or whatever. I believe in it. But if we're going to get these funds from public tax dollars or whatever, then it's going to need to serve these particular interests, and those interests are competing with other political agendas, maybe, or with other markets or financial constraints. So you might do research for 20 or 30 years, and maybe some opportunity, some policy window opens up, and then we have the opportunity to have that research be influential. Right. Okay. So within this, right, then we have the little research with the R, right? The research that folks like us do. And so all of those national goals, these problems that we see, past research, that's supposed to give us these ideas. We go out, do lit reviews, form studies, collect data, designs, analyze it, and then those reports are supposed to go out there, right? Okay. So I'm a methodologist. I got to think about not just which method am I going to use, but how these things fit in with other areas. And there's a lot of mixed up terminology. People say the methods at the same time that they talk about techniques, and the same thing they talk about methodologies. And it's real confusing, actually. And some things, like when they talk about quantitative or qualitative approaches, that word approach is not used consistently here. And the way that you collect the data is technically not the method, right? And so I use this in my methods class to help people kind of understand what it is that this class is about or that class is about. And all of these things are connected. And there's not a perfect method out there. What makes a method valuable is that it's able to give you the information that you need to do the things that you need to do. Okay, so this is important because methods are like tools. But the methods that you select, the methods that your mind is open to, these things are further downstream from larger decisions that you have to make. And some of those things, maybe they're unconscious values that you have that are going to guide those choices for you. So I want to talk about indigenous paradigms. Okay. Now, we talked about that social constructivism and that positive thing real quick. In this area, this philosophical point of view, and so let me just throw this quick shout out. When qualitative research was wrestling for legitimacy back in the 1970s, it used to be whenever you did a qualitative article, you had to have this whole section just on the philosophy of the method. And now we don't have to do that anymore, but you had to do that for like 30 years. And the reason was because grant funders, reviewers, your colleagues didn't know how to assess quality within qualitative research. And working from a positivist paradigm, why would you study subjective realities if we know that they're false? We want to know about real reality. And so qualitative research had a hard time getting funded, hard time getting published. Qualitative researchers were kind of seen like hippies or something. And it was like, well, how do we create legitimacy? So like Lincoln and Guba, they write this book, and they say, well, first off, let's talk about it on the ontological level, on the epistemological level, and the axiological level. And if you read Kovac's book or Smith's book, they're in there. And these are like these $10 words. And everybody's like, what the heck do they mean? And so we'll talk about them now, because what qualitative did to establish its validity, indigenous researchers have been doing for the last 15 years or so, taking the same approach. So they're saying, if you evaluate the research that we do, then it won't look valid, but it's because you're working from these philosophical assumptions that don't deductively lead to what our decisions are influenced by. Now, this relational paradigm, instead of having, sorry for these cheesy drawings, I'm not the best artist on the paint software, but rather than having reality be out there foreign to us, and we're trying to apprehend it and put it in our brains, or rather than us just being, like, I guess, free license, blank check to create reality however we want to in a socially constructed sense, reality, and I've read it in lots of different places, but it's best articulated in Sean Wilson's book, that the ontology. So what is real? That it's actually a relational existence. And could you believe that the world was not relational and still get through? Sure, right? I don't know if any of you grew up believing like in universal truth, and maybe like you've gotten a little softer on that claim as you've gone through the years. It's the same way. Reality hasn't changed, but your ideas about it have changed. So thinking about it from a positivist thing or thinking about it from a relational thing, it doesn't change what's real. And we would argue that what is real is actually more in line with this relational ontology. Okay. So everything is interdependent on everything else. And that means the present is very important, because the present is the manifestation of all these relationships actualizing at the same time. And things could be different. Reality could be a different thing. It could be different right now than it will be in an hour or whatever. And that's because things are constantly in flux. Because of the intense interdependence, this is why we try to show appreciation to all of these connections that we recognize need to exist for our moment to be now. Our perception is a little bit deceptive that way, because everything appears as a unified moment, right? You go to college and you learn that actually your moment is influenced by social forces and economic forces and cultural forces, and your mood is influenced by your stomach bacteria and the quality of air, and there's all these things around you that make, but you just experience it inside your own face, right? So part of this relational perspective that we kind of go to college to get learned on, this is something that's present all over the place in indigenous societies, indigenous cultures. Remember, Sean Wilson, the Cree man, he wrote this book in Aborigine country in Australia. You look at the cover of the book, it's got Aborigine art on it, right? So this is something that's like higher order. It's not at the level of, well, what's your origin story? This is like a fundamental central organizing theme of reality. And I would argue that it's a better version of reality. If you look at system science or developmental science, human development, ecological systems, it actually testifies to interdependence, more so than independence or reductionism. So from this relationalism, if we say this is the way reality is, if we work from that assumption, then deductively it leads to how we conduct ourselves in our lives, but also in research. So Sean Wilson doesn't have this little diagram, but I figured, hey, we're doing a talk on psychology, got to have a diagram here or there. Forgive me for making it look, like a little house or something. I didn't mean to oversimplify, but I would say that this central organizing theme that we're all related, that this insinuates responsibilities that we would call ethical. So this is where, well, respect, responsibility, reciprocity. Why? It's because you don't want to burn the bridges to this web that you exist in, this interdependence, this interconnection. And then, so if this is the ethical responsibility, then when we say, okay, well, how do we know what we know? We know what we know through our relationships. It flows back up to this idea of what reality is. Well, why do you do what you do? This is the axiologies. Well, we do things that are going to help us to live in right relationship. Oh, okay, so this is a value-led research. Okay, so this is going to inform our designs, it's going to inform our purposes, and then that's going to inform our methods. Okay. So right here, I already kind of made the point in that last slide, but I just want to drive it home. Why the why of these things? Well, is it just well, those people just like those things. Those people just have those cultural norms. But if you look at the cultural norms as they've been articulated in the literature, both for indigenous cultures and in indigenous research, these principles are consistent with the belief in interconnected interdependence, right? When we talk about when we're in the sweat, when we bring that water pot in, we touch the grandmother stones, and we say all my relations, right? Trying to show appreciation for this network. It's something that's implicitly and explicitly throughout all kinds of different ceremonies. And so that conceptualization of the world, from it flows these both cultural norms of working together, trying to not interfere with the nestedness of our relationships. Within research, right, there's a greater emphasis on trust building, on representation. It's very relational, right? And sometimes I got students in my class and they're just like, oh, I know what this is, relationship to relationship to relationship. But it's not like in psychology, we think like interpersonal relationships only. It's as an ontological thing, it's what is, it's being. Okay. And so these are just manifestations of it. And I just want to throw them out there because to me, it's not like I have to learn a bunch of new rules. It's like, no, these things make sense deductively once you understand the kind of the larger central, I don't even want to call it a belief or a value, because even beliefs and values are downstream to me than what I think this relationalism is. Okay. So what happens when we don't think about these relationships? Well, we got this type of kind of sad story that we know happened with the history of research. And Linda Smith was really the one that blew this up the best and has created this space for all of us to talk about these things all the time. We know that, thinking about one group of people thinking about themselves as different from everyone else, separate from nature, above nature, categorizing Indigenous people into nature, that allowed unethical research to take place, both in terms of exploitation of knowledge, right? Ideas were extracted just like coffee and copper and pepper and sorghum and all this stuff. Knowledge was also extracted. And then once it was extracted, awkwardly enough, even though I stole your idea, I renamed it. And I stole the idea from you, but I'm smarter for having it. There's a picture in the corner. This is I can't remember his first name. I think but his last name is Hooker. And Indigenous people, the Himalayas, are bringing them rhododendrons. And this is at some British museum. Underneath the painting, it says local Indigenous bringing local flora and fauna so that it can be sent to Britain and properly categorized and named. And so it was like, these are things that other people had taxonomies for, knowledge of, but it ended up getting digested and re-represented and then owned and claimed and discovered. And so there was this process of co-opting. In local research, right, it's been called, in contemporary times, research has kind of been called the R word. We've seen it have negative connotations. The helicopter researcher, where they just kind of fly in, drop down, take their data, and then take off. And everyone's like, whatever happened to that dude that said he was going to help us with this thing or whatever? Fishbowl syndrome, right, which is kind of, it's been called the gaze, the Western gaze, where it's like it's exotic, it's different. And so the research is there to kind of perpetuate that or kind of build careers based off of the perpetuation of otherness. Deficit models, which we've seen and have been articulated over the last few decades, this emphasis where research continues to do exactly what the church used to do. It was like this definition of Indigenous people as the problem. It was a problem for bureaucrats, for settlement, for development, water, timber. It was a problem for missionaries, for salvation. It was a problem for the military in terms of settlement. It's just like this. It doesn't seem like the actors keep changing, but this narrative continues to stay the same. Oh, it's a problem, and that's why we need to intervene, right? So now Indigenous scholarship is kicking this back, right? Trying to do strength-based research, trying to do independent research. And then through all of this stuff, there's a bunch of well-intentioned people too, just operating out of ignorance, where they're doing things like, I think if you read the OCAP website, it says, we think Western science does a good job protecting individuals' rights in research, but not collective identity rights. Oh, okay. So, sometimes it's like, even when you're doing a good job in one area, it doesn't mean that you've gotten the market. And then I'm not going to read all these, but then we got all these different other examples of research that's been done on Indigenous folks that have had negative fallout, that have left a bad taste in people's mouths. And this is just the ones where it was like, egregious. It's not even all the research that just did nothing, right? People just participating in interviews and surveys endlessly so that folks can get masters and theses and dissertations and publications and grants. And then after 3 to 5 years, take off and have the contributions evaporate. So earlier I had said that from relationalism flows down ethics, talked a little bit about ethics and then what happens without thinking about relationalism, the disethics. And then I said from those things flow epistemology and axiology. So the epistemology, this is how do you know what you know? What counts as real knowledge, credible knowledge? And then the axiology is why? Why do you see me? Back in the old days, I remember when during my undergraduate, we still kind of received that mantra, knowledge for knowledge's sake, right? Like that was something that people would say just knowing, because remember, from that positivist point of view, reality is some far distant thing. Discovering anything that's real, that's worth knowing. Whereas within this relational framework, you do know something already. You are in touch with reality. You are part of reality. And the work that you do should be helping to bring balance within that reality. So we got kind of different philosophical assumptions. And from these things, our designs start flowing. All right. So I have on here, I'm trying to mix it up, right? Got throwing a lot of content at you. It's like a whole 2 semesters worth of information here. So from the design choices, I put on here Indigenous or not, and that's kind of a false dichotomy, but I'm going to use it to my advantage here because there's a spectrum that I think needs to it warrants its own kind of conversation, and this is because I see these ideas get talked about a lot on a lot of theses committees and dissertation committees, and I don't know, the way that these words get used, they stick in my teeth, and so I want to kind of throw some ideas out here. So one idea that gets thrown out a lot is Albert Marshall's idea of two-eyed seeing. Okay. And so what I think that means is that you got a Western point of view and an Indigenous point of view, and that one eye is not small and the other one is big. It's supposed to be binocular vision. Okay, so this to me is, I think it gets misused. Like I've witnessed people say, I read this paper, I thought about my process, therefore I'm doing two-eyed seeing, or I used a two-eyed seeing approach. And I'm just thinking, as somebody, who's struggled with my own ethnic identity for large parts of my life, and I'm like working my tail off trying to do respectful Indigenous research, and I think, I don't know how to do two-eyed seeing. How is it that you were able to learn it so fast? Like, yeah, 6 months into this thesis project or something. And so I think that the intention of this idea was really not like conceptualized for like one individual. And if they were one individual, you would almost like need a traditional education and then a Western education, right? You'd have to have a kind of mutual exposure to both of those. And there are people out there, educated folks that grew up tradition, that probably are best able to embody this idea. But it's easier for me to think about this as a team, where you have people who are holders of both perspectives. And the complexity there is, well, who runs the project, who makes the decisions, who has the grant funding, like really, how is it equal power? But I want to throw this out there because it is a prioritization of an Indigenous perspective. Okay, that's part of the claim there. So if you do have this, in Indigenous perspective, let's say that there's two different ways to go with it. Now, everybody, when they hear that word Indigenous research, Indigenous methodologies, they go, I would say, at least in their mind, and this is true with like a lot of non-Indigenous academics that I talk to, as well as Indigenous academics. The idea is that it's going to be culturally based off of traditional cultural ways of knowing. But Linda Smith, in her original book, she says the editions changed, so my page numbers are off now. But she says there's two different kinds of Indigenous different methods. She goes, there's one that returns to traditional ways of knowing, and then there's another one that uses Western methods for purposes of self-determination. Ah, all right. This is a proper distinction here. And whether or not you remember earlier I said what makes a method appropriate is that it does what you need it to do. And so if you're advocating for a particular community and the people that you need to argue with, they need a Western method or something, are you going to not do that? Right? Even though that would help self-determination? Or if there was something where this needs to be culturally infused, would you then use a Western method for that? Like if it's important symbolically, in terms of like the people in the room, that this is defined in different terms. Like, so this is actually it might be a spectrum, but there's a choice here to be made. And so this strategic or congruent, this got broken down real good by Anishinaabe woman named Lena Ray. She wrote this article in 2012, and she basically said there's two different kinds: the strategic one, and then the congruent one. Now, I want to make a distinction again, even though I know I'm making distinctions left and right here, that whether or not you choose congruent or strategic, both of those, you're engaging in a research process that is largely, the rules are defined, the whole process is defined by Western institutions. So I don't want to confuse this with like straight up traditional ways of collecting knowledge and collecting information. In fact, that goes on all the time. And for the community knowledge keepers and ceremonial people and tribal leaders that have that, they don't need REB approval. They don't need grant funding to do it. They don't need to ask anybody's permission. They don't have to share it or publish it or nothing, because that's their knowledge. It's within community knowledge, right? So really, when we're talking about, well, what counts as information and how are you going to inform this process to make sure that it's ethical? We're talking about it in these spaces where you're expected to do reports and collect data and that kind of thing. All right, and so there's just these different pockets, and I have found that for myself, I get asked a lot more for strategic types of research. That's, people don't usually call me because they want to integrate traditional ways of knowing. A lot of the folks that call me or hit me up, they're battling with some system, or they're butting their head up against like some funding renewal, or they're trying to demonstrate that something is important or working. And so, this is where, I come in. So it just happens to be that's been my experience, is that the strategic one is an important one to have. But the congruent one, where we're building or even preferencing traditional ways of knowing and doing, it doesn't mean that strategic is unethical. And so I'm going to come back to this in just a second. If you read Walters and Anderson books, Indigenous Statistics, they do a great job of talking about how the processes, the questions that you ask, the variables that you include, the way that the information is disseminated amongst the community, whether or not it's in reports, whether or not it's in speeches and town halls, on the radio, all of the ways that you engage with the research project, even if it's with numbers, still has to follow relational principles. Okay. All right, so this is Ray's description of how convergence methodologies work. She says that like Maggie Kovac's book, Indigenous Methodologies, is an example of convergence. Sean Wilson's book is a example of convergence. And so this is an area where someone is heavily utilizing Indigenous perspectives, but they're still engaged with this research thing, this kind of foreign process that we're all expected to go through now to show that our ideas have credibility. All right. So those are the ones that I want to say are kind of like on the Indigenous side, right? If you're an Indigenous scholar, you're going to run into that for sure. But what if you're a non-Indigenous scholar and you want to work with Indigenous folks or have a partnership with an Indigenous community or something? Then what, right? Do I start trying to develop some Indigenous congruent methodology and learn the traditional knowledge epistemologies of whatever, is that the route that I'm supposed to take? And it seems like that there's a different set of advice for that group. Willie Ermine's idea of ethical space is so potent here, right? I feel much more comfortable with somebody saying, I want to work on creating ethical space, who's coming in, to this research environment, maybe for the first time, then saying, I'm going to do two-eyed seeing. Right? The two-eyed seeing, it just seems so bold to me to say, I got that. And then have like Indigenous representation, or that's your first, that's how you come out the door, and the collaboration hasn't even started yet. So I think that this idea of ethical space, it's just such a rich idea where, Willie Ermine, I think, did he steal it from the Commerce? I can't remember. There's a video on YouTube. He says that he names I think it's a French author, that he says, well, this idea of ethical space is when you got these two different groups that have different cultures that come together. They're going to have different values. They're going to see things through a different lens. How do they interact without conflict? It's like this ethical space, this space that you create where you kind of suspend judgment. You're more willing to listen to understand. So this ethical space is I think good advice here. And then at least in the United States, in the National Congress of American Indians, which is kind of like the Assembly of First Nations here, in 2010 they released a report that said, of all the different methods and strategies that are out there, if you want to work with our Indigenous nations, you need to use community-based participatory research, CBPR. That was their kind of official statement. They have a whole report on it. You can look it up. It was written by Puhit Sahota. And I have a student that last year scanned all of the CBPR literature specific to Indigenous, working with Indigenous populations. And she found this framework. It has all these parts, 16 different components to it, but don't get lost in my eyes. Let me just say it like this, that at every stage of the research, there's a way to share power or a way to keep power. And so community-based participatory research, if in its fullest expression, and it might be a continuum. And I've been on projects where I was like, please, somebody help me interpret this data or analyze this data. And people are just like, no, you do it. I don't want to look. So sometimes that happens, but so maybe it's more of a spectrum, but it's still a choice at every stage that you can include or exclude the people that you're working with. All right, now we're getting all the way downstream. We got our designs in hand. We got something we're working with in terms of what decisions are we going to prioritize. We got all these, like a tree diagram now. Now we're here at the methods. What methods are we going to use? Again, this has to fit the needs of whoever you're working with. It also has to fit with this larger relational belief structure that defines our ethical obligations to one another. But then once we're there, then we have, I wish I could say that there was lots of methods that have been articulated. This is still, I think this is going to be the like for this up and coming generation to really engage with, because right now there's only a few that have been described. There's conversational method by Margaret Kovac, story work, which is kind of in the educational context with John Archibald, Dustin Louis, who used to be over here at UFC, but now he's over in British Columbia. He told me he was working on a witnessing method that's built off of a traditional listening practices and DECA culture. And then if it's quantitative, right, then you go quantitative with it, and then all the quantitative methods are kind of available to you. But the how you do it, questions that you ask, variables that you measure, all that stuff still has to be defined in whatever supports self-determination best, represents the wills and agendas of the Indigenous people that you claim to be working for. Once you get the data, how are you gonna code that? How are you gonna analyze it? Right? Are you gonna be cognizant of strength-based versus deficit model type of things? Are you gonna introduce Indigenous concepts or just try to fit in Indigenous experiences within pre-existing taxonomies? There's all these choices here to do. And then I mentioned it before, but how do you disseminate? All right. So you decide to go. All right, I'm on it. I want to get into this research game. I'm in. There's a bunch of tolls to participating in this that are over and beyond, I would say, like lab research, where you have a lot of control, and that you blast surveys out to populations you don't ever have to meet. And some of it is that this type of work takes more time. If you work in Indigenous research, it's considered more of a niche discipline, so you end up getting funneled into kind of specialty journals that don't have high impact factors and stuff. It's time consuming on both ends, especially if you're engaged with work in your own home community. It's within the institution, there's always that risk of getting tokenized or whatever, and then getting like the type of respect. And I think that at some point you just grow kind of thick skin. You stop caring so much, right? You fight for the space. If there's space available, if there's not, you go someplace else. But it is something that people encounter, and there's articles to document that too. When you're doing involved with research, you got I would say it's hard to think about a lot of the, if you were just studying atoms or something, you wouldn't have to think about poverty or 60 scoops or residential schools or deforestation and all that. It's stuff that's heavy. It's one of the reasons why I don't work like in the clinical space. It's just because when I used to do the substance use work, it was hitting me too close to home. It was really hard to live and do that type of work. And then when you study things that are like, you're studying your people, you go through the thesis process. It's their job to tear your document apart. It's their job. They're supposed to scrutinize your ideas. And if you were talking about, I don't know, reproductive systems of plants or something, then you're just like, yeah, tear up my ideas all day, right? But now you're talking about my people, man. So there's like this different like dynamic when you're going through the process. You get imposter syndrome when you join graduate school, whatever. You're like, oh man, I feel like I'm not qualified for this. But then go to the community, and then you just get the same feeling. You're like, oh man, I don't know if I'm supposed to be a researcher. I don't know, right? So you get like, there's these dilemmas, and then there's still like this kind of cost, I think, that comes with just kind of battling ethnocentrism. Sometimes it's racism too, but I would say that ethnocentrism is actually way more pervasive, and just this idea that anything that you're involved in, it might be cool, but it's not as good as what we got. It's just like that idea. Sometimes you start to internalize it, and then projects get delayed, they dissolve. Community partners, the whole team that you worked with ends up getting replaced with some other family of employees or something. And so there's just all these things that you have to tackle when you get involved with it. But but I think it's worth it. I think that it's involved. I had like a whole bunch of research examples to show you, but I think that are we running out of time? Yeah. So I'll just show this one, and this is a shout out to my dad, because he always said he never really understood what I was doing, and so I whenever I told him what my dissertation research was on, he'd always say, "What's your dissertation on? Innies and outies?" And I was just like, "Oh." So I had to create a slide where I started to talk about research on innies and outies, but it's not real. All right, I'll go ahead and stop there.
Oh, thank you so much for ending with the innies and outies. I love that so much. Really, thank you so much for your generous talk, Adam. There's so much material there and food for thought, and maybe we're going to need to schedule a second talk where you share some of your specific projects. We have, before we don't have a lot of time before we go to the small group, but I want to present at least a gift on behalf from the IRC to you. I hear you like coffee, or we hear you like coffee. So we've got 3 different bags of coffee beans for you from an Indigenous company that's in the area, Spirit Bear, and one of their mugs designed by Bill Helen. And also I was at OBA on the weekend, and you talked about we're all relatives, we're all related in your talk. And I picked up this one poster that says we are all related, and it shows a progression from, I guess, feather to tree. And so we'll be sending that along.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
So really tremendous thanks. Really short on Q&A. Michael, maybe one question from the audience. I know it's going to be hard. Oh, I see one. How about I'll go for it? And then people can put things in the chat. We'll save the chat, and there'll be food for thought for future times. One question that's somebody has written: what do you think has been the most helpful thing as you've been navigating in both Indigenous and non-research spaces?
Definitely. So my family, we tease a lot, like a lot, like hurts your feelings sometimes a lot, but it's all out of love, and it's all in good fun, and it really does create an avenue where people can tell you things honestly, and you learn to not, I think that it gives you an immunity to getting defensive, because you don't want to get defensive. You want to laugh when they tease you, because otherwise they'll tease you even more, right? You don't want to get defensive. So I've had a lot of people who have been in my life that will tell me things straight up, and those folks I felt like have helped me to keep my feet on the ground, helped me not to fall in love with my own reflection type of deal. Sometimes you start thinking that I think as you move throughout school, all your friends are going to work, they're starting families. You have to tell yourself, like, why am I doing this? And there's not a payoff for a while. Schools takes a long time. And I think one of the explanations that's out there is that you're better than everybody else, and that's why you're moving up. And it's so deceptive, and it's not true. And you don't, and so I think that one of the things that's really helped me navigate these spaces is that I had folks that I felt like inoculated me a little bit to needing approval from places that they don't really know me, and they'll move on real quickly without me. And so I have to kind of be I have to make sure that I can maintain my credibility with people they got my phone number. So anyway.
Again, really, thank you so much from all of us. So many thoughts and reflections in the chat. And deep thanks to Elder Murry for starting us off, and to the rest of the group. We'll see you again. We have your email address. You registered, so we'll keep you posted on any other things we do. And you're always welcome to go to the SFU IRC website, where we post about our own events, but as well as other groups' events. And I think that's one of the things that we can do to help serve the different communities. So Kinanoskomitin, and we'll see you again. Hi.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
So students who are pre-registered for the small group meeting, if you can go to the Zoom link that you haven't received in your emails, well, see you there.
See you later.